Hello, Boulder Bookstore community, and thank you, Stephanie, for inviting me to do this author Q&A. I was so sad not to be able to come out to the bookstore and do a book signing for this book. I was fortunate enough 3 years ago to do one for my debut novel, Missing Tyler. So today I'm here with my book, Finding Lancelot. It's quite a different book, even though one has missing and one has finding in the title, just a theme I have, like missing and finding things. So today I want to talk to you about my book, Finding Lancelot. I've got some questions that Stephanie at the bookstore has prepared ahead of time for me, so I'll answer those, and I'll do a little bit of reading as well. But first, just a little bit of backstory. I started my professional career out of college at the Boulder Bookstore, so it always has a special place in my heart. For 3 years there, I worked the retail floor and hosted book signings, actually. I worked in the marketing department, and it was a dream of mine to stand on that gorgeous stage in the ballroom on the second floor and to be there for my own book one day. And I got to achieve that a few years ago. So thank you to that. So many of my old work colleagues are still there, and it's wonderful to reconnect. So thank you to the bookstore. So I'll jump into, first I'll explain a little bit about the book, and then I will answer some of the questions prepared ahead of time. So Finding Lancelot is a love story. It's a time travel in a way because it deals with past life regression. So it's set in two different time periods. But the story is essentially a little bit of a coming of age and kind of an arrested development sense of the word, or in the sense of the phrase. It's a story about Amanda who, let's just say, life's not going well. She's in her mid-20s. Her career's not really taking off, and she just had a tragic breakup with her boyfriend. And so she's trying to figure out what to do with her life. And she stumbles upon an opportunity for past life regressions. So chapter 1 opens in the regression, and that's what I'm going to read to you, is that opening scene. And one of the questions that Stephanie asked was, what was my inspiration for this book? And I have to say, that opening scene really came downloaded to me during a writing exercise when I was on a writing and spirituality retreat in England in a place called Glastonbury. And if any of you have read Mists of Avalon or are familiar with that lore of England, Glastonbury is supposedly where Avalon was, where Lady of the Lake is. It's connected to ideas around people believe Christ's chalice is there. They believe King Arthur's sword is there. It's just always been steeped in lore. And I do say, from my own experience, I had a lot of weird experiences when I was there on that trip. There's some strong energy in that area. And when we did this writing exercise, the whole first scene downloaded. So it was pretty clear what the story wanted to be. I had this intense scene, and then from there, I had to build a real novel around it. So one of the questions was, have I done a past life regression myself? So I hadn't. I'd read a lot about them, especially Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss. He wrote a couple of books about past life regressions. In fact, I got to host one of his book signings when I was working there at the bookstore years ago in the early 90s. I've always been fascinated by metaphysics. I like to say that my tagline as an author is I bring metaphysics to the Sex and the City audience. It's a little dated now that Sex and the City isn't as popular of a show, but I'm fascinated by reincarnation and karma and energy, and those always infuse my books. And I did get a past life regression recently during my final edits, like about a year ago, and it was a kind of a trippy experience, and it didn't really work. I don't know if that was the therapist or me, but I don't know if I'm going to rush off and do it myself. I think I'll let my characters do it. So another question was, what came to me first, the plot or the story or the character? And like I said, this opening scene was really what came to me. And then I slowly developed contemporary version of her. So there's two characters. There's Kira from the past and Amanda in the present. But the past came first, and then I created the contemporary narrative to frame it around. What is my writing process like? She wants to know if I'm an early morning writer and how do I go about this. So when I'm in a really good writing zone, I tend to write very early in the morning. I'm an early bird, so I like to get up and be at my computer, maybe 5:30, sometimes 6, and write for a good hour, hour and a half. I don't have a strong focus to stay for long periods of time. So for me, getting in a good hour or an hour and a half of writing is probably that's a good day. And if I can do that, 4 days a week, that's fabulous. That's when I'm usually in the first draft zone. And that's what I did with finding Lancelot. I kind of tricked myself to get myself to write it. So I went to a coffee shop almost every morning before my corporate job. I would get there, 6:30 and write for an hour, hour and a half, like I said, and treat myself to a latte or a cappuccino or some kind of a reward. So I got to be this bohemian writer in the coffee shop starting my day before I went and did my corporate recruiting work. And that worked a lot. And it ended up helping me get the novel done in less time than I had anticipated because I had this rhythm of going. I also like to track word count and give myself goals. So, say I'm trying to achieve a first draft by a certain date, I might break down into micro goals of, well, that means I need to write 1,500 words a week to get to that deadline. And so I'll track my progress each week and see how I'm doing. And that has helped me a lot too, rather than opening up a document and saying, I'm going to write a book today. I try and break it into micro goals to achieve that. And it seems to be a better way to go about it. In terms of my writing, I love writing in cafes. That background noise, the music, it all seems to really help get me into that zone. But I can also write at home in those early mornings when the house is still quiet. And then there was a question around how have I been doing during coronavirus with writing. And really, during coronavirus, I've been focusing on editing Finding Lancelot, and this has taken multiple rounds of editing. Last December, I thought it was done, and I delivered it to my publisher, and she said, oh, no, no, no. We need to make some massive changes to the voice. Part of the challenge in this book is I'm dealing with a third person narrative, but we're really in her head. Sometimes we're in her head in contemporary Chicago. Sometimes we're in her head in England in the 1500s. So there's lots, even though there's one person in a way, there's lots of voices. And so distinguishing those became a challenge. And what we ended up doing on the final draft is putting her thoughts into italics first person to designate out when you're in her head versus when you're watching her in her life. And that, I think, really helped bring make her more human, more empathetic, helped us as the readers connect to her better. And it definitely strengthened the novel. And that was a big thing. And we did that all through, that's what I was working on during Corona. And then after that, there was the rounds of copy editing, making sure that the writing was tight. There wasn't unnecessary short scenes or exchanges or descriptions. And then after that, it goes into proofreading. So there's lots of layers of edits that need to happen to get a book out the door. And all of that proved to be a really helpful distraction during Corona. I haven't done a ton of new writing, but that's mostly because I've been focused on getting this book out the door. What have I been reading during lockdown? Oh my gosh, I've been reading so much. I've read some really good books. Ask Me Again. Oh, no, I'm blanking on these. I should have had these prepared ahead of time. The Life of Sam Howell, The Dutch House. I've been reading a lot of epic novels that carry, span generations and really get you deep into characters and their lives. I love historical novels. I'm currently reading Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin. But I'm also listening to Nine Perfect Strangers by Leanne Moriarty, which is fun and light. I think I've binged the entire Jojo Moyes series, all of her books, pretty much during lockdown. So I read a lot. I love anything that has to do with a good love story, an epic family saga, and historical fiction. Those are some of my go-tos in terms of what I like to read the most. And next, they'd like me to read a short passage from my book. So I think that's going to wrap up the question part and give you enough background. I don't want to overshare, but This has definitely been receiving reviews that it's a great escape read. So if you need something like that to get you through this winter, it's available on Kindle and paperback, and it might be just the right thing. I do have some signed copies at the bookstore available for purchase. So I'm going to take a drink of water, and then I'm going to dive into chapter 1. They're coming. There are so many. I'm standing on the top of the Tor, our lookout hill in Glastonbury, close enough to feel the heat of the stones of St. Ryan's Tower. I can see the line of them stretching for miles and miles. They're trampling the thick green grass as they force their way through the wooded narrows and out along the green rolling hills towards Glastonbury and the Abbey. I'm the fastest and the slightest. That's why I was sent to watch. It's always me. The sun glints off the soldiers' armor as if they were sent by God himself. It's a mesmerizing sight. I can't move, trapped by the spell of their might. Through a force of will, I release my legs and pivot quickly, too quickly, colliding with one of our sacred thornberry trees. A thorn from a branch rips into my arm. Blood trickles down the sleeve of my ripped dress. I dash for the Abbey. On my frantic return, I see Robert sweeping the entryway outside his father's shop. You must flee! The king's army is coming! I call out and slow my pace to deliver the warning, but Robert is stunned and doesn't respond. Now, dear Robert, please, you must go. We all must go. Robert lowers his head and answers, then the time has come. Like Winchester and Cleve, they've come. His look of inevitable defeat is too much to bear. Lord, have mercy on us. Please take shelter. There's no time left. I must go. I must go warn the others. I press on him to step back off the street and towards his father's shop, into safety, but he doesn't move. He grabs my arms and pulls me in tight. Kira, there's something I must tell you. He stares fiercely into my eyes, his hold increasing. I sense him trying to contain me forever. His warm brown eyes bear so many memories. Sweet Robert, always thoughtful and kind and there for me. His presence is like a salve, but I must go. I've already wasted precious moments. There's no time. The others need me. As I push Robert aside, he kisses me firmly upon the cheek. My first kiss. I cry as I leave him there on the dusty street, refusing to look back. It's the king's army, I call, racing through the Abbey gates. My blonde hair trails behind me. My screams carry as I fly through the grounds. There are knights on horseback everywhere. They're coming so fast. I scream until I choke and my voice can no longer carry my words. As I approach the herb garden, I'm overcome by a vision. The Abbey is burning and crumbling around me. Death is everywhere. Rosemary, my pet lamb, wails before being brutally slayed, her innards yanked out and left steaming on the grass. These men are doing it. They're goblins. Goblins, I cry before collapsing into the safety of the sage. Everything goes dark. I come to amidst the sound of the knights crashing through the Abbey gates. Monks are scattering. Nursemaids and their babes wail in the orphanage. I race into the kitchen only to find the staff still working as though nothing has happened. I yell to flee, but my voice is hoarse and empty. There is nothing more I can do. From the kitchen, I hurry towards the sanctuary of the Lady Chapel. Instinctively, I pull out my necklace. Gazing deep into the stone, I invoke a prayer. Good Mother Earth, Goddess over all, I pray you watch and protect me, save me from the fall. My body fills with a pulsing sensation that shoots directly from the ground into my feet, up my legs and spine, and into my heart. I am a vessel for something so much larger than myself. Fear sparks its shivering energy through my body. The smell of burning flesh chokes the air. Even the chapel is not safe. Fire creeps up the Abbey walls and lays waste to the wood. I remember a nursemaid telling me long ago that everything fights to live, even fire. I crouch in the corner, shielding myself from the onslaught. A knight is quickly approaching. He's too close to where I'm hiding. I try to pull back into the shadows of the chapel, but he's spotted me. Before I can react, he lifts me off by the scruff of my dress and hoists me in front of him onto his steed. My muscles lock in place. Through the clutch, the pendant on my necklace embeds its outline into my palm. I know what knights do to women like me. I'm now his war prize. He'll have his way with me, and then I'll be killed. I recoil as he pulls closer. Hold on tight! Let me go! I attempt to free myself, but his grip is too tight. So long as you have the necklace, the goddess will protect us. No one is ever supposed to see my necklace. The head monk, Father Stewart, once said that I would turn into a witch if anyone outside of the abbey ever laid eyes upon it. I examine myself. I don't feel like a witch. Who are you and where are you taking me? I yell. The knight says nothing. We continue to gallop, past Robert's shop and the others along the high street. Not until we're safely outside of Glastonbury does the knight speak again. I am Miles, and I'm taking you away. A bell showered the room in a cascade of sound, and a voice said, "It's time for Amanda to wake up." Slowly, Amanda blinked her eyes open, steadying herself on the couch with her left hand, while her right wiped away the sweat dripping down her forehead. Therese was sitting across from her as she had been a few minutes, hours, perhaps days ago. How long was I under? Amanda wondered. The room smells of lavender now. Did it before? Maybe it was there and I just didn't notice. Therese's silver hair glistened in the soft glow of the table lamp by her desk. Her eyes were wide and inviting. She had a regal air, wearing a velvet crimson dress that fit snugly around her buxom chest and flowed effortlessly to the floor. Therese emanates love. That's what drew me to her during our initial consultation. Yet now, after what I've just gone through, and what the hell have I just gone through, I wonder if I should have been so trusting. Take a moment, my dear, Therese said in a calming voice. Amanda rubbed her eyes, fully awake, and pulled herself into a seated position on the soft plush couch. Her body appeared to have made it back in one piece. Taking a mental inventory, she was still wearing the jeans and navy sweater she'd been wearing when she arrived, and her grandmother's diamond engagement ring was still on her finger. Her watch read 4:06. She arrived at Therese's at 3. I must say, your narration of your experience was so clear. I could see everything that was happening. How are you feeling? Therese leaned forward and took Amanda's hand in her own. Hesitant at first, Amanda's need to feel comforted overtook her restraint, and she relaxed her hand in the warm palm before her. Therese's fingers were a dazzling display of silver and jeweled rings. I guess you didn't warm me enough, Amanda responded as she stood too quickly. Her stomach quaked. Nausea moved up her body as she righted herself. Sorry, she called out as she flew across Therese's office, past her antique walnut desk, past the bookcases and the Norfolk pine in the corner, and straight into the bathroom, missing the toilet and throwing up into Therese's shiny pedestal sink. Amanda wiped her mouth and stared at herself in the mirror. Her pale skin looked whiter than usual as she wiped her face with a wet paper towel and pushed back the stray blonde locks of hair with her damp hands. Her eyes were bloodshot, dulling the vibrant green that was usually her most complimented feature. Everything in Kira's world was so alive, so much more real than any dream I've ever had. From the smoke in the air to the grittiness between my fingers, every sensation was intense, palpable. Amanda pressed her hands to her face, to her lips. I was in that teenage body just moments ago. I felt so different. It was my mind, but the body was clearly someone else's. And that girl was what, 16, maybe, barely? She pressed her hands to her belly, her legs. It's been 10 years since I was in a teenage body. I'm still Amanda, yet inside me is someone else, this Kira? Amanda studied her reflection in the mirror to see if she could see the aspects of Kira and herself in this lifetime. But all she saw was a scared 25-year-old who'd had no clue what to do with her life when she arrived for her session, and now perhaps knew even less. Her legs slightly numb and tingly, Amanda walked back to the couch wondering, do Therese's other clients react like this after their first time? Do they all have this intense an experience? Maybe I should have done more research before attempting such a thing. Roxy was right. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It's so typical of me to be so dumbly naive and overly trusting. She also had a nagging feeling she damaged her body in a way she'd never thought possible and likely was not reversible. Let me help you. Therese guided Amanda back down on the couch, then walked behind her desk, opened a small office-sized refrigerator, and returned with a glass bottle of apple juice. Amanda gladly took it. Most sessions aren't this intense, I have to say, Therese began. As I said before, I'm truly impressed by your level of recall. You were able to describe what you were experiencing so vividly, it felt like I was right there with you. It's like I was narrating a movie. Therese nodded. Amanda took a long, deep breath. I know you have a lot to process. Completely exhausted, Amanda nodded. Yet layered beneath the exhaustion was sheer exhilaration as her mind raced with questions. Who is Kira? Was this truly my life once upon a time? Was the Abbey real? Does it still exist? Who was the knight and where was he taking me? In the short amount of time she'd spent in that other world as Kira, Amanda had experienced more trauma and excitement than anything she'd ever experienced in her life. The first time can be very moving for people. If you're up for the journey, I'd love to guide you back again. It will get easier and feel less unusual each time you regress. Therese sipped from her ceramic mug, holding the thread of a tea bag in place with her index finger. I believe we can do magical things together. Magical things, Amanda thought. I'm so ready for magic. It's like I've been given the map to a treasure hunt and I can't walk away. When can I come back? Therese smiled and reached for her appointment calendar. So that's the opening scene for Finding Lancelot. And from there, the journey continues. Thank you again to everyone at the Boulder Bookstore for inviting me to speak today and share this with you. There are signed copies available for purchase, and I appreciate the support. Have a wonderful day and happy reading.